If you've been dreaming about one normal summer trip this year, a few days at the beach, a long weekend somewhere that isn't your own couch, you've probably already had the same quiet moment. You pull up the prices. Then you do the fast math in your head, and the trip you could swing last summer suddenly feels like a stretch. You're not imagining that. And no, you didn't do anything wrong. Let's decode this together. So here's the real question for today. When a normal summer break starts to feel out of reach, what is standing between you and that trip? And is there a way to take it that doesn't quietly follow you home for the rest of the year? Here's the part that makes it sting a little. Travel didn't just get more expensive in some abstract, on-the-news kind of way. It got more expensive at the exact moment you wanted to use it. The latest inflation numbers showed airfares jumping almost 3% in a single month, right as the summer season kicked off. That is not a slow drift you barely notice over a year. It's a jump you feel the week you sit down to book. A lot of that bump traces back to higher fuel costs working their way into ticket prices. And that is the kind of pressure that tends to stick around for a season, not vanish next week. So if it feels like the timing is working against your wallet, it kind of is. The trip got pricier on the same calendar page where you finally had the time off to take it. And you are very much not the only household staring at these prices and running this exact calculation right now. Now, rising prices are only half of this story. The half almost nobody warns you about is how most of us end up paying for the trip once we decide to go. Here's the move that quietly does the damage. You book it on a credit card and tell yourself you'll clear the balance in a month or two. Then, ordinary life happens. The balance just sits there. And the moment it sits there, the thing stops being a vacation and starts being a loan. And the reason this trap is so easy to walk into is that "I'll pay it off later" sounds completely harmless when you say it out loud. The catch is that later almost never shows up empty. Later arrives with groceries, a birthday, a surprise deductible, a dozen ordinary costs that were always going to land. So the balance that felt temporary quietly turns into a permanent one. The real focus in this story, and notice it isn't the airline or the hotel, it's the interest rate on a balance you carry from month to month. A credit card APR is simply the yearly rate the card charges you on money you haven't paid back yet. Pay the bill in full, and you never even meet it. Carry a balance, and it shows up every single month like clockwork. And right now, that rate is rough. The average credit card rate is still parked up near 24%. So the trip you booked at one price keeps charging you a little extra over and over just for the privilege of having borrowed the money to take it. Here's where this spreads and where it stops being only about a vacation at all. A vacation balance doesn't politely sit in its own corner. It lands in the same account as everything else you owe: rent, groceries, the car repair you absolutely did not budget for. So a trip you took back in July can quietly compete with your real life all the way into the holidays. That's the part that catches people off guard. The trip itself lasts a few days. Its payment cycle can drag on for months. And every month that balance is still breathing, it's pulling a little oxygen away from the next thing you really need. So let's go back to our question. The thing standing between you and that beach usually is not the sticker price of the trip itself. It's whether you're paying with money you already have or borrowing it from a paycheck that hasn't even shown up yet. One of those is a vacation. The other one follows you home. Let's make this real with actual money for a second. Say a modest summer trip runs you somewhere around $2,000. Flights, a couple of nights, food, gas, all the unglamorous stuff. Put that on a card and pay it down slowly, and you can easily end up handing over hundreds of extra dollars before it's finally gone. Sit with that for a beat. Hundreds of dollars stacked on top of the trip. That's basically a second-long weekend you paid for and then never took. Same money, no extra trip, nothing to show for it. That's the quiet cost of borrowing for fun. The fun is over in a few days, but you keep paying for it long after the tan fades. Now, here's the version that doesn't do that to you, and it's almost boringly simple. Take the full cost of the trip, every piece of it, and split it across the number of paydays you have between now and when you leave. That gives you one save number. Then move that amount into a separate account automatically on the day you get paid, before it has a chance to melt into everyday spending. We know. Set up an automatic transfer is probably the least thrilling sentence we've said this entire video. Stick with us anyway, because that is the whole trick. When the money moves on its own, the fund fills up while you basically forget about it. And when the trip is paid for in advance, you get to enjoy it instead of quietly running interest math at the dinner table. There's a quieter payoff too, the kind that never shows up on a statement. When a trip is already funded, you feel it the whole time you're there. You're not silently pricing every dinner in future interest, and you're not turning a good memory into next month's stress. The money already had one job, which was this trip, so you spend it like it's yours. Because it is. There's a second lever, too, for when that save number comes back bigger than your timeline can handle. Don't just give up on the trip. Shrink it. Travel midweek instead of over the weekend. Drive 3 hours instead of flying. Shave one night off the back end. Skip the add-ons you won't remember. None of that is settling. It's matching the trip to the cash you can really gather. And a smaller target is one you can hit. Think of it like ordering off a menu instead of canceling the meal. You might not book the full week at the resort this year, but a funded long weekend still gives you the real break, minus the bill that chases you into next winter. So here's your one move this week. Open a separate savings account, nickname it for the actual trip, and set a single automatic transfer into it for the day after your next paycheck lands. That's the whole assignment. You've just started funding the trip instead of financing it. A few things worth keeping an eye on from here. First, and you can knock this out in the next 5 minutes, go find the real interest rate on the card you'd reach for on a trip. It's sitting in your banking app or printed on last month's statement, and a surprising number of people have never once looked. Knowing that single number changes how tempting that card feels at checkout. Write that rate down somewhere you'll see it before you book. A number you can see is a lot harder to ignore than one you're pretending isn't there. Second, watch where travel prices drift as the summer rush really builds. Airfare has been climbing into the busy season, and that pressure tends to shape how far any trip budget can stretch. Third, keep half an eye on credit card rates in general. They've been sitting high for a long stretch now, and whether they ease off or hold steady changes the true cost of carrying any balance at all, vacation or not. None of this is locked in, and we'll be watching closely as the next round of numbers comes out. So if you walk away with one habit today, let it be this. Decide what the trip costs before you fall in love with the trip. Then fund it on purpose, a little at a time, in an account of its own. A vacation you already paid for feels like a completely different thing from one you're still chipping away at when it's cold outside. The trip can be the same. How you feel about it afterward won't be. Quick reminder, everything we cover on Decoded Money is for educational purposes only. None of this is financial advice, and we're not licensed financial advisors. Before you make any money moves, do your own research and talk to someone who knows your specific situation. If this was useful, hit subscribe. We do this every week. That's the Decode for this week. We'll see you in the next one.